you doing, Christina?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing awesome. I'm actually
Good.
super stoked that you came to join us tonight. I always really like your perspective. I was just talking to some clients, and they were saying how helpful you were even before their purchase.
Oh, that's always good to hear. That's what I try to do, help people as much as I can.
Well, we find that, when it comes down to great possessions, they normally start with great prevention. So I wish more people would be calling you as they're making these decisions. Maybe they would be like us. I know that when we have questions, it's just so much easier to coordinate with the person that's going to be making it all land at the end. And that's really how I feel about the lawyer process to real estate, is that we are kind of like setting it afloat, and then you're the one that makes sure it lands.
Exactly.
So, in talking a little bit through our experience tonight, we are saying how buyers are entering the marketplace. And in many cases, they're worried about two things. They're worried about missing the one, they're worried about paying too much. Then they go through the process and they meet all of these incredible characters. They're talking to realtors, they're getting their mortgage all set up, they're getting insured. Somebody's talking about term insurance versus life insurance. We've been action packing tonight with all the people that you could see, but I don't know that there's a single person that's more important to this process than you. And you're like the unsung hero. You're at the end, you're sweeping up after us, and we really appreciate that. What do you wish more people knew at the beginning of their purchase?
Oh, okay. I wish more people knew to call and ask questions before they agree to anything, um, because it will save them a lot of money in the long run. So, as you know, I always offer a free half hour to everybody if you retain me or not. So, I'm always happy to help people, even if they don't choose me, get the right information before they sign the contract and it's binding. Because, as you know, once it's signed off on, there's not much I can do to fix it. So, that would be kind of the big thing that I would wish people would do is call and ask questions because it might be a really easy thing to add into the contract to protect you, um, where after the fact, my hands are tied.
See, my questions always to you are, how are we adding to this contract? How are
Yeah,
we adding this to the contract? Is there a way that we can set this up that's actually going to pave the way? Because I think the biggest thing that we're all trying to avoid is disputes, right?
exactly.
And some of the language that we're putting in, I I really like to run it past a lawyer because I'm not one.
No, well, that's fair enough, right? I'm not a realtor, so you know way more about that than I do.
Yeah, I can definitely help you get a great deal. But when it comes down to it, we've seen some interesting things. I know that we're really proactive when we're writing offers about talking to the listing agent about what they need to disclose. So at
Exactly.
the time that we're deciding how much somebody's going to pay, we want to know, do you have anything disclosed that's going to be outside of the regular purchase agreement we're going to have to adjust to? But one of our big conversations is also with RPRs.
Yes, that's kind of, I would say the number one question I get is about an RPR because that and title insurance, because they do go hand in hand, and a lot of people are unsure kind of what the purpose of title insurance is and how an RPR protects you.
Well, I think that we can break it down here. So, first off, a RPR, as we're describing it, and as I'm explaining it, you can correct me here
Hmm.
because I think you'll need to. But it's a real property report, and it looks like a drawing drawn by someone who can only draw stickmen.
Correct.
But it is actually a survey that's completed using the surveyor's handbook. So you know that somebody who's trained in measurement has gone out there and made an official measurement of the property. So we know what's there. But they're often talking about improvements. What do you see as being an improvement?
The most common improvements would be hot tubs, decks, large sheds are considered an improvement because they usually aren't movable. Movable sheds don't fall into the RPRs generally. Gazebos, pergolas, those are kind of the big ones that we see most of the time.
Yeah, and we've seen a whole bunch of these things come as a variety of different ways. Like, some of these pergolas are done with all the permits and so on. Some of these are done without those types of protections. And often, what we're trying to do is find out ahead of us making an agreement, because a lot of people may not understand, but it's not like one person sat down and wrote the purchase agreement for real estate.
Exactly.
Like, it's
And
hundreds and hundreds.
yep,
So to explain further, the purchase agreement in residential real estate is a living document.
correct.
Normally, when they make changes to it, they joke about how those changes are written in blood because somebody got hurt. So there was some reason that they changed that purchase agreement, right? And it was normally based on going to court. And you're like one of my favorite lawyers to talk about this, because there's a whole bunch of lawyers that practice real estate that'll never go to a courtroom.
Yeah, that's fair enough.
And you are a legit litigator. In fact, possibly one of the scariest people I know that wears alligator shoes.
Well, my kids certainly agree with that. They can't get sneak anything by me these days.
I could only bet. So when we're talking about somebody lining up one of these real property reports,
Mhm.
making sure that all the improvements are on the land, the county gives it compliance if you're in Sherwood Park. If you're in the city, then it's the city of Edmonton that's giving compliance. But
Correct.
that's where we normally start to see some variances, because I know in the residential contract you can get compliant, non-compliant, or non-conforming.
Correct.
But what are the things that you consider the biggest messes? Like where do you think that more people could get towards a 5-star experience by noting on the way in? I know we're always making notes like, oh, there's a pergola here, or like you were mentioning, I think hot tubs are looked past.
Yeah. Okay, I'll go on the hot tub note. I will say the big one will be if someone builds a hot tub within their deck, that usually needs an engineering report. And a lot of people don't get that done before they apply for a permit in the county to put their hot tub in. So that can be a big one that would cost a seller if they haven't had it properly permitted. If you were a buyer, I would always want to look, if you're looking at a corner lot, that's a big one because a lot of people don't realize when they're building their structures that that full corner is not their property and a good chunk of it is actually the municipality's property. So you run into a lot of issues with fences being not within your own property. And depending on the municipality, the county is not too bad. The city of Edmonton's fairly punitive on costs for encroachment agreements. If it's on the city property, it could potentially also be on considered the roadway, which is even more expensive to get permitted. So those would be kind of the ones that I would think are the most costly to fix.
I would agree, because like we see sometimes where it's like a little encroachment and then they have like an algorithm that they use and it's going to cost like X amount of dollars. But then
Yes.
once it gets from like it could be literally inches different, but it goes from one policy to the other. And then
Yes.
all of a sudden these numbers, like they add extra digits.
Also, depending on the municipality, Fort Saskatchewan does this quite a bit. You would actually, if you had an encroachment on City of Fort Saskatchewan property, they will also require you to list them on your insurance policy and have different policy factors that could increase your homeowner's insurance as well.
Wow. The biggest actually concern that I had recently remember is somebody had actually put a basketball net in the first few feet of their driveway.
Yeah. Which is a utility right away. In most areas of Sherwood Park, most newer areas, utility right away is in the front of your house. A lot of older neighborhoods, Glen Allen especially, utility right away in most of Glen Allen is along the back of the fence line at the back of your property. So yes, that's a big one if you're on a utility right away as well.
I really appreciate you clearing that up. The other thing so once someone finds the property that they want to buy, often when we're representing buyers, we're
Mhm.
not there when they're listing the property or having those initial discussions. So we do come across the situations where nobody's talked about a real property report.
Mhm. Yep.
And now we're standing with a client who really wants that house, and they're really concerned about it doing that safely. They can't control all the decisions that the home seller has made,
Mhm.
and that leaves us in this place where all of a sudden we're opening the discussion around title insurance. Can
Yes.
you give us a quick synopsis of real property report versus title insurance?
Okay, yep, absolutely. So it depends who I'm acting for. But if I'm acting for a buyer, I always encourage them that, well, the two different sides, right? If I'm acting for a buyer, I always encourage them to get a real property report with compliance because the number one factor is it's reusable and title insurance is not. So let's say you buy a home, you love it, you accept title insurance, and then you go to sell it down the road and the person that maybe you're selling in a buyer's market and they're insistent on a real property report and compliance, and now you have to eat those costs to fix all of those defects that you weren't aware about because you accepted title insurance. um, so if I'm acting for a buyer, I always try to ask them, if they haven't signed the contract, to insist on a real property report and compliance, because then it's the seller's responsibility to fix any defects. And then that buyer can take that real property report with compliance or any encroachment agreements that the seller has to get for them and reuse it down the road when they want to sell. So it's a good cost savings for them.
I like that. How basically you're saying for sustainability, the RPR is a big advantage. Is there any advantage or disadvantage when it comes to the actual protections between seeing what's there or being insured against what's there?
No, you're completely insured through title insurance as long as the defect is not known at the time that you purchase. So if you have a client who finds this house that they love and there's no issues that are known about and no real property report has even been ordered, that client is perfectly protected if they go ahead and obtain title insurance. And the number one thing with title insurance that I think people forget is, so let's say that same buyer that you had finds this house that they really love. They accepted title insurance and didn't know about any defects. If they find out about defects down the road, they would put in a claim to that title insurance company, and the title insurance company pays the cost of bringing that property back up to compliance. And that would also include things like if a basement was properly or not properly permitted and nobody knew, like there was no electrical permitting. If they find down the road, oh shoot, this basement didn't have electrical, they would contact the title insurance company, and the title insurance company would pay that cost.
Hmm. So, I actually have a question coming
Yeah.
in from Facebook here, and in a situation where it's like a developer fence,
Hmm.
what if a situation had arisen where you bought a property, moved into the
Hmm.
property, and then find out that the developer fence is actually on your property?
Well, it's on your property, so it's fine. There, like, in if it's on your property, there's no compliance issues because it's on your property.
So, but if it's I think that what the question is getting at is if it is on your property, do you
Hmm.
have control over that even though the county built it?
On your side of the fence, yes. I mean, the county generally, if it's a developer fence, you generally in some areas are responsible for maintaining it anyways, even if the developer put it in.
That's interesting because that was actually the question coming towards is that the developer fence was positioned in such a way that it lost the property size, so it's actually on their property, and they're saying that it doesn't appear that they can do anything about it because the county owns it. And I was just wondering if you had any perspective on that, given that is it on your property or how does that work?
Like how far into the property is it? Is it like very far in, or is it like a few inches on your property?
Where would the line be?
Well, if it's anywhere touching the other side of the property, then the county can do whatever they want for sure, because it can straddle that line, right?
That's
I've
interesting. But if it
Yes,
is actually off by a few inches or off by more than a fence post width away, does that change?
you have more control over it because it's fully within your property.
Oh, excellent.
Yeah,
So
but
then, so then in a situation, if that fence was totally on your property, you would have the choice of taking it down.
essentially, but the county can always come back and say, well, now you're making the whole street look odd. I mean, the county is difficult to deal with at the best of times. Like I've seen clients who along Granada in Nottingham, the developer put the fence not within everybody's property and on county property, and the county was making people get encroachment agreements because the fence was not in the client's property.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
So they definitely have like kind of the be all end all, but there could be some things that could be done here. So as much as we could go deeper into this, I think that maybe it's better that we refer this client to or this inquiry to come and take a chat with you.
Yeah,
Maybe
absolutely.
take a look at what they have for a real property report and get some information because it sounds like if that fence was all the way on your property, you might have some options there.
Exactly. And again, I offer a free half hour. So if they want to contact me, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Well, I appreciate that because I use that pretty regularly. I have to say that I bother you. I get on your phone, other teammates are calling you, but we're trained that way. We're trained to call you first,
Yeah,
so that everybody ends up knowing that once they meet your offer, once they get to your office, as it was presented to them is how it's going to take place.
exactly.
Well, I really appreciate you coming by and giving us some clarity about the difference between an RPR and the title insurance, because that's something that comes up pretty regularly. And
Yeah.
also your perspective on those improvements. I think that will help everybody be a little bit more aware of those things that could be problematic.
Yeah, not a problem.
This is Christina Henriques, and it's from Henriques Law right in Sherwood Park. So if anybody's looking, they can easily find all of Christina's contact information because we make it handy. She's a trusted expert, and she's on our trusted expert list. And we very much invite people that may have any further questions to give you a call directly.